Hello, FRC teams, and welcome to the first Fundraising Toolkit Section 3 webinar, which is focused on the topic of team documentation and developing team documentation. My name is Renee Becker, and I am the first Fundraising Toolkit coordinator. And joining me today are FRC teams 1018, 1625, and 2470. The first Fundraising Toolkit was created through a grant from the Argosy Foundation, and it was given to FIRST to provide teams with materials to fundraise, so to develop those materials and to help teams through the fundraising process, to help teams develop local relationships in their communities and find potential relationships and partnerships that they could connect to and access and talk to them about the FIRST program. And to also highlight successful fundraising methods that have worked in other areas and that teams have used that teams may not be aware of. And so this process in this fundraising toolkit is to help increase the sustainability of teams and to really help them dive into their local network and their local area, and to work with companies nearby and to create sustainable fundraising efforts that the team can do from year to year. So the goal of Section 3 is to help teams develop sponsorship materials or team documentation materials that they can utilize when approaching a business or a company about the team, or even going out to outreach events and different things like that. So this section will contain this webinar, and obviously description of the section, and then also it will provide examples from the teams who have tested out this toolkit. And so we'll be able to see sponsor packets from those teams and potentially other teams as well, depending on what sort of results we have coming in from the community. So team introductions. I'd like to first introduce FRC Team 1018, Pike Robo Devils, and we have Mary here from the team to say hello. So Mary, why don't you tell me a little bit about the team?
Sure. Well, we're the Pike Robo Devils, and we're part of Pike High School. We're an urban team from Indianapolis, and we've been in FIRST. This is our 11th season this year. We have about 30 students and about 5 full-time mentors on the team.
All right, and our next team is FRC Team 1625 Winnovation, and our representative is Kayla. So Kayla, can you tell us a little bit about 1625?
Hi, we're Winnovation, and we are a rural team from Winnebago, Illinois. We are entering our 10th season with FIRST, and we have 35 students around on our team and around 7 mentors on our team.
All right, and then Evan is from FRC Team 2470, the Blitz Team, and why don't you tell us a little bit more about your team?
Certainly. We are Team 2470, the Blitz Team from Bloomington, Minnesota. We are a suburban team. This is our going into our 7th year participating in the FRC competition. We currently have around 36 members, or 24 members, or 26 members, 24 of them being students and 2 of them being mentors.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for being here today to help us with this webinar and also for testing some of these materials that we've been developing in this toolkit. So moving into this team documentation process and some of the templates we've created for the teams to use, what were your first thoughts when you saw the sponsor packet template we've created and now have available to teams? And Mary, why don't you go first and kind of talk about what you thought when you saw the sponsor packet template?
Absolutely. Well, at first, the sponsor packet template looked really overwhelming. I was like, where am I going to get this information from? But then when I really sat down and looked at it, I realized a lot of the information came straight from the fundraising plan in step 1. And I was able to literally copy and paste a lot of the work that I had already completed in step 1 and I added a letter onto the sponsor packet template, and really the rest of the work was just formatting it and making sure that it looked good to send out to companies as an official document.
Absolutely, and that was the intention behind developing the fundraising plan the way that we did. The idea was that really having a team business plan is one of the best ways to really create a direction for your team and identify how your team should grow as a company. However, doing a full business plan could be really overwhelming, and so by having teams do a condensed fundraising plan and really focus in on the specific areas that are, for fundraising, and having those things be part of a sponsor packet that students would be able to utilize when they talk to sponsors were all things that we kept in mind when we were creating this toolkit. So it's good to see that has come across in the working through these materials and through the different pieces we've developed. So Kayla, why don't you talk about what you've seen with this sponsor packet template and what you think about it?
My first impression of it was I really liked how flexible it was and how much a team had the potential to adapt it, and but at the same time, how many resources it provided and how much direction it did give. And fortunately, we did have already a lot of the information just from like our business plan and our team handbook, so it wasn't very difficult to put together, but it was a very nice, concise tool for our team to have.
Absolutely. And the intention is for teams to be able to utilize pieces that they've already developed and just bring it all together into one item and one document that they'd be able to, print off for any sort of presentation or discussion about what the team is, and how people could get involved with the team. And Evan, why don't you talk a little bit about how you were able to work on this sponsor packet template with your team and what your first thoughts were?
All right. Well, the first thing we did is we took a look at the sponsor packet template, and we actually expanded on it and made it a little bit of our own sort of thing. We found it was a great format overall for compiling all the information about our team, and it really put it in an effective manner that made it really easy for us to give out to sponsors and show them who we are, and what we do.
Excellent. And those are all great. That's great feedback. And please and do consider, as we go through this presentation, if there are any items that you feel, that there were challenges you faced, you can absolutely mention those as well. It doesn't have to be all, this is a great resource. We can talk about the challenges too, and then that'll help us develop them. So, all right. Working through this process, what were some ways that you made this template unique? Evan, you just mentioned that that was something that you liked about the toolkit. So how did you incorporate that template and really identify the team's identity through it?
Well, we looked at the template, and we took all of the ideas from there, basically all the ones we really liked, and we started from scratch, completely from scratch. We didn't really use any of the template other than for the idea. We custom created all of our documentation, and actually in this case we finally gotten some buy-in from our students, and we had our students make all of this documentation with little guidance from the mentors, which was really nice. And with the ideas we got, you'll see in the documentation we provided to Renee that we really think we put something together that looked really nice. We actually at the end put all of our documentations in these really nice black and dark blue folders. We put business cards in them, and we put our logo on them, and we tried to make them look as nice as possible. And we think it was really effective in getting our information out there to potential sponsors and partnerships that we are looking to create.
And that's a great explanation, because you can absolutely take this template, and we even suggest that teams add on to it, include a letter, really make it their own with their team colors and things like that. And so, Mary, I know I've seen your template. Can you talk about the different ways you made the template unique to your team?
Absolutely. We really use the template a lot, and I pretty much just inserted our unique information into the same spots that the template used. I really liked the way the template was set up, and it really worked for our team. But in addition to that, we of course used our own logo, and we used really nice fonts that we thought would look nice with the template, or nice with the packet to make it look unique. And we printed them in color, which was a special thing for us, and we put them in a nice we added a letter to the sponsor packet as well to kind of introduce what it is, so that when we handed it to different teams, they would know why they're getting this packet and kind of get an introduction with some more information about FIRST as well as the packet.
And these templates, are available in the fundraising toolkit, section guide. We may have taken out, some of the contact information and for the purpose of the teams, but the anyone looking at these templates will be able, and actually not these templates, but these teams documentation, will be able to see how they've really created this and developed it on their own. So, and Kayla, why don't you talk a little bit about how you were able to pull information from other places to make this packet for your team?
Well, we looked at the template and looked at the information that it was asking of us, and we provide a team handbook for new members on our team that kind of explains what robotics is, what our team is, and basically a lot of the information that the template was asking for. So we took a lot of our handbook and sort of redirected it, and we really focused in on the financial aspects the template provided and like the budgeting and things to make it more angled towards a sponsor, a potential sponsor in a company. We found it really easy to work with, and we really liked how it was very concise and simple so that someone new to FIRST could get the gist
Absolutely.
of
And so,
information.
and hi, Kayla. So you're explaining that the sponsors are able to really get the gist of, what the first program was through the information. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I think you cut out for a moment, but that's wonderful, and that's absolutely what we want, sponsors to have that information for. So, all right, moving along. So we've kind of already gone over this. It sounds like the teams have absolutely taken some of the information from this fundraising plan that was created in section 1 of the toolkit and have pulled it into this packet. Mary, were there any specific areas that were really easy to just move over straight from the fundraising plan to the sponsor packet?
Absolutely. Specifically the list of in-kind donations, the list of, let me look at my sponsor packet here. Specifically, I thought that the list of the in-kind donations, what we represent, the team organization, the team impact, the mentor roles and description, the degrees of sponsorship, all of that information was information that we had already worked on in our fundraising plan. So all of that pretty much we just had to insert it in. The only really new work that I had to do is making the letter and kind of inserting our appropriate contact information.
Yep, and that's exactly the way created. And so you can definitely see that 1625, 24, 70, Evan and Kayla, that it sounds like the teams as well. You pulled out the sponsor levels and the team budget specifically, and that was really how you were able to make your packet. And so I think we're going to move along and ask about some of the challenges that your teams have faced. And so, Evan, can you talk a little bit about what challenges 24/7 you ran into?
Certainly. One of the biggest challenges we found was, getting our students transportation to the sponsor facilities or partnership facilities and delivering these team sponsorship packets. It's not necessarily, getting them printed out or anything like that. It's getting them physically on campus at these areas. We had to find people to drive them. Sometimes, again, we don't really have any apparent basis to go off of, so it was either myself or the other mentor doing this, and very few of our students can actually drive. So that was one of our biggest challenges. Another challenge is when a sponsor says no. It's hard for the students to recuperate after that and be like, is it worth their time? And initially, yes, that was hard for our students, but then eventually they started seeing all the successes that they were getting with a couple of these companies, and that made them want to continue on and going and finding these new sponsors.
And so it sounds like the takeaway for that particular challenge is to remember that you're not going to get a yes all the time. And it's really, it's really the fact that you have to be able to overcome what could be potential failure. But that isn't necessarily the case. I mean, there may be cases where the team has gone in, and while someone couldn't sponsor that year, at least you've told them more about the program, and they're not aware of what your team is. So I think that was a wonderful example. Thank you, Evan. So Kayla, what challenges did Winnovation run into when working through this team documentation process?
In not having a very public collection of our budget information to begin with, going back and reorganizing and finding all the information for sponsorship and budget for our past 10 years and identifying specific needs that we hadn't really honed in on, that was definitely a challenge. But once we got talking with our mentors, it became really easy because they knew a lot about that. So one of the things that our team had to overcome was just making it all common knowledge and finding everything and making sure that we covered everything and really had concise, detailed, good information available.
Absolutely. And then, Mary, can you talk about the challenges that you had run into in developing the documentation packets?
Sure. One of my biggest challenges was formatting it correctly. There's a lot of information from the fundraising plan that we put together, and trying to get that to fit into 4 pages and really look neat and concise for somebody who doesn't know what FIRST is, and make it so that they can understand it was a bit challenging, I thought. Especially, trying to make it look professional. I tried to involve the students a little bit in the creation of the packet, and so trying to kind of hone their ideas and focus them in so that we can fit everything in the space that we had without making the packet too long so that somebody wouldn't read it. We wanted, it to be short enough so that somebody would read all the way through it, but yet have all the correct information in it as well.
And you mentioned, the formatting and making it look professional is one of, something that's really important, especially if the team is representing itself through its, this documentation. And so by formatting the template in these ways, we hope to show teams that, having, just a nice document that isn't necessarily graphic, a graphic design that's a beautiful work of art, but being able to really format it correctly and kind of have those examples for teams is a place for them to start and then always make it better. And so I think that that's a great example, Mary. I appreciate it. And so advice for creating this documentation, starting with Kayla, what were some things that you think other teams should know about creating this team documentation packet?
To make sure that all of the knowledge is well-rounded and well-known throughout your team, so that literally any member on your team, whether they're a rookie or a senior on the team or an adult or someone who's been with you forever, make sure that everyone really knows the knowledge that you've put together, because once you work hard on this whole thing, you want it to be a very useful tool. So make sure that all of the team has communicated and that everyone knows what this sponsor packet is so that everyone can use it and you can maximize as a team on what you've created.
Excellent. And, even doing training on how to use this team documentation packet, I'm sure it would be incredibly useful as well, to make sure that everybody on the team would be able to just grab a packet and go up to someone and start talking to them about what FIRST is and what their team is all about. So Evan, what sort of advice do you have teams about the process you've gone through?
Yeah, spend some time thinking about what you need for your team and why. If you're going up to these sponsors and you're telling them that you want $10,000, well, make sure you have a reason why you want that $10,000. If you're just telling them give us $10,000, that's not going to have any effect. And the same goes for in-kind donations. What are you going to use their in-kind donation for? Make sure you identify these things before you go out and just start saying you need them.
Thank you. And Mary, what advice do you have for teams in terms of this sponsor packet?
I would say make sure that you're using the fundraising plan that you've already developed. You can definitely use your own work to make it a lot easier to create your sponsor packet. And of course, edit, edit, edit. There's always going to be a typo here or a formatting error there, and when you are ready to print it off and send it to companies, you want it to look as professional as possible, because this may be the only contact that you have with some companies and your only chance to let them know who you are and what you do. So it's really important for the documentation to look professional, especially if you have students do it. Make sure that you're always looking over things before you print them off, and especially if you're spending money to make them look nice when you print them off.
Absolutely. And the fact, the idea that you're spending the money to print off these nice colored copies on, potentially really nice paper are all things to keep in mind. And, really doing that due diligence of doing the editing and the checking to make sure that you've got a good final product is really important. All right. And so, the teams here, they've gone through the first step of the fundraising toolkit, which is developing, the team needs and really working through a fundraising plan that would allow you to identify the team needs. And then you moved into doing a community analysis, which was all about finding and locating potential businesses or potential relationships that the team could cultivate in their local areas. And now the team has moved into this team documentation step to get ready for students to be able to take this packet of information to sponsors or companies and potentially leave it with them, to see what sort of outreach could be done. And so teams have worked through all these steps, and I know that some of the teams here in the webinar have started already contacting sponsors. And so I wanted to touch base with you about how that's been going, what sort of what are the results you've gotten from talking with sponsors. And so Mary, do you want to start in terms of how things are going with the team since you've gone through this process?
Absolutely. We pretty much just started talking to companies, and we've made our first round of calls in the past week. And so far, we've had a lot of interested companies, especially engineering firms, that had no idea what FIRST was. And so we naturally thought that engineering companies would know something about FIRST, or at least the students did, because it's such a large organization. But a lot of the companies really don't know what FIRST is. And so that was kind of something that was interesting to us. And we had a lot of positive feedback from some companies, and some companies weren't really interested. So I'd say overall we had more positives than negative, and really connected with some potential new sponsors.
And that's great news. I know when I was going through this process with teams in Minnesota, we realized that we would kind of walk into a sponsor, we'd start explaining, and they'd ask us the age-old BattleBots question. Is this like BattleBots? And so it was interesting to know that they really didn't know much about that first program. And so I think that is a great point you have there. And so, Kayla, do you want to talk a little bit about how the team is doing in terms of your fundraising process, and maybe what some of your next steps are going to be these upcoming months?
We've also just sort of started talking to companies, just started getting the word out in our community. We're always finding new companies too. And as Mary said, I agree. A lot of them have no idea what FIRST is, and it's really exciting to get to explain that to them. And a lot of people we've talked to get really excited. They're like, "Wow, I wish I'd had something like this when I was a student." Of course, I would like to support it, especially a lot of the smaller ones, just because they see more of an investment in the program in bringing people back to our community, because it's important to bring back engineers and STEM careers back to our community to expand it. So a lot of them get really excited about that. We're going to continue moving forward and contacting more sponsors. And I think one of our main focuses is to get more team members comfortable with presenting to sponsors, and work on workshops within our team to make team members more comfortable with giving these presentations and talking about the program comfortably, and like the proper ways to ask for someone to sponsor you. So that's where we're going.
And I think the idea of doing those workshops is incredibly important. I'm working with two teams on section 4 of the fundraising toolkit, which is all about the sponsor presentation and preparing the teams and the students for them. And through that, one of the things that they've kept mentioning is that the students go through training. The students go through these mock presentation formats where mentors and parents come in and they pretend to be business owners, and the students have to present to them, and then the parents and mentors get to say no, or they get to kind of be a pushover and say yes. And it's a lot of fun, but it is also an invaluable learning experience for those students. And so I think that you have a great point in terms of having to do that workshop with the team. So Evan, why don't you talk about what your team has found by working through this process, since I know you started earlier this year?
Yep. So we went through our first phase where we contacted around 20 companies, well, the students did, and then the students went out and traveled to these various companies and, presented about FIRST to them, or handed off just the packet. And through that, we've probably got around 3 or 4 new sponsors that total $1,500 in new sponsorships for our team, as well as many in-kind sponsors, like our local machine shop here that wants to help us build parts and build field materials, especially like the pyramid this last year. That would have been great if we could have had a sponsor make that for us. I know it was something really difficult that a lot of teams ran into. So we've really found quite a few new resources in our community that, as 1018 and 1625 were saying, they didn't know about FIRST initially until we went up there and started telling them about it.
Absolutely, that's a wonderful point. And in terms of that local machine shop, I know, in Minnesota, we had done a workshop where we got teams together and we would sit down with them and keep updating each other. We called it a roundtable. And so we were able to actually network with people, with teams in our community, and identify the machine shops that they were using, and machine shops that would also be willing to take on work from our team as well. And so I think, Evan, that you have a great point there in terms of finding that machine shop is incredibly valuable. And as we were talking about in the previous sections, that ability to network and talk to teams and share resources is definitely a cornerstone of the first program in terms of gracious professionalism and really wanting to raise the level of competition so everyone can be at their best. So, all right, moving on. I would like to ask the teams on this last slide here. Do you have any final advice to teams that they would be able to take away with in terms of this webinar? So think about that for a second. But if any FRC teams have any questions in terms of this fundraising toolkit or in terms of this section, feel free to contact me at rbecker@usfirst.org. And so, Mary, do you want to talk about any final advice you have to teams about this whole process that RoboDoubles has gone through?
Absolutely. I would say overall, don't get discouraged by all the work that you're putting into it initially. It is a lot of work up front, but once you have this packet, you can use it in upcoming years as well. So think of it as an investment in your time that will pay off in not only the years to come, but also you'll hopefully get several donations to your team, which will help you sustain the team and help it to grow in new ways that never would have been possible without taking on this effort.
Excellent. Kayla, let's talk about any final advice you have to teams now that Winnovation has been working through this process and that you, as part of the marketing team, have really developed these materials. Kayla? Oh, looks like we may have lost Kayla. So, Evan, can you talk about the Blitz team and any final advice you may have?
I certainly can. This may seem like a daunting task at first, but I really, really would encourage teams to just get it started and really look to see what you can do and see what you can build with this fundraising toolkit. It's a very, very powerful resource you can use in order to find new resources in your community. So I definitely suggest teams, just start with it and see what you can get done.
Absolutely, and just some final advice to teams for me. I would like to mention that this is a long-term process, so you're not just going to magically find a $10,000 right out of the blue working through this, and so really keeping up with it, maintaining it, and identifying some key people that can make sure the team's working in these areas is incredibly important. So to wrap up, I want to thank the people who are here. I have appreciated working with you. I'm glad that you've been able to benefit from working in the toolkit. And I hope that later on we'll be able to bring you in again to do some follow up and see how the team has done in terms of fundraising. So thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much,
Thanks,
Renee.
Renee.